Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the planet session of the World Design Assembly 2023 Tokyo. To begin with, I would like to share with you some of my thoughts on this session, Design for Planet. Obviously, the practical foundation of this kind of argument is in environmental crisis or crisis-related issues, as in the environmental emergency, environmental crisis, of all sorts. And of course, these kind of subjects are widely discussed across the globe, particularly, for example, Design for Planet Festival just held in the UK. And of course, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation Summit and so on and so forth. But here we would like to broadly discuss these issues surrounding design for the planet, whether it is about the environmental crisis or the how we can respond to the sustainability-related issues of the, in the broader context. So, without further ado, I would like to hand over to one of my panelists today for his introduction, starting from Mr. Eisuke Tachikawa. Let me introduce one by one. Eisuke Tachikawa-san is currently a president of the Japan Industrial Design Association and CEO of a design company, NOSIGNER. He's a design strategist focusing on alternatives for a helpful future. And これなんだ?
Hey.
Jun? But anyway, Eisuke-san is the advocate of the evolutionary thinking, which draws from the natural phenomenon of biological evolution and the design of creative educations. So this session allows each panelist to give them a talk for 15 minutes first, and then we'll have a break after that for half an hour. When we come back together at 4 o'clock, we'll have a shared discussion together with the Marianne-san, who's on stage this morning for 40 minutes to wrap up. So that's the schedule. So if you could start your presentation.
Okay.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
So first of all, thank you very much for choosing Planet session. And yeah, I'm Eisuke Tachikawa, as he introduced. And yeah, as he introduced that I'm the president of Japan Industrial Design Association, so the board of this whole conference. And this Planet session, for me, it's really, really important. Since we strongly believe that planetary issue will be the next design issue, I mean, the central issue. Which we really need to think the most. So, and we really empowered by, I think you also was empowered by Mariana's session. Actually later, Mariana-san will join for our discussion as well. But for the first of all, that, before my presentation, this is also my presentation, but let's kind of confirm what kind of situation is current planetary situation is. Actually, it's kind of coincidence that we use the same slide. This is called planetary boundary, and this has many of the issue actually we are facing challenges, like of course climate change. But you know, the climate change in amount is not super high compared to, for example, biochemical flows like the saturation of the nitrogen and phosphorus. Or also biodiversity has so kind of crucial damage. So there are many challenges, but as well that, you know, within that we are kind of living quite happy life. With you can have everything in the street, but it's kind of tricky. Current situation is that, you know, we are not responsible to where to come from and where it goes. So in a way that, of course, we kind of keep renting the resource of natural or the future generation, and also consuming and trashing to the nature. So our civilization is now kind of living in the delusion that human being is only the society. So, and because of with the conclusion that we are facing actually the gigantic extinction, which is often called the sixth time in the history of every organism with this 4 billion years. So the last time was actually the 66 million years ago. So it's a kind of quite serious problem, and we are facing many of the challenges like how to reduce greenhouse gases. It's kind of exceptional within this 400,000 years. But not only that, the natural disaster is keep increasing currently. So what we are doing through design is to keep challenging these issues. For example, for how to prevent disaster, or how to make more renewable energy accessible, or how to calculate CO2 or such kind of stuffs. But today, what I would like to talk about is adaptation. And we started the project Adaptment. That is about climate change adaptation. And adaptment, this word, is the kind of coined word with integrated adaptation and development together. Since that we need to develop, but more adaptive way. It's a kind of tricky issue that usually development is more important to for the developing society compared to how to adapt ourselves to the natural for the natural environment or ecosystem, or also that to protect ourselves from the natural disasters as well. You know that climate change is a kind of huge challenges. So, for example, we are currently facing almost every year that somewhere in the world we're facing huge flood or huge natural disaster. This year was in Syria. Last year was in Pakistan. It was kind of severe situation was there. And this is a kind of confirmation that I think most of you may know that currently climate change, for tackling climate change, we are having kind of two strong criteria or measurement. One is mitigation, and the other is adaptation. And these two kind of criteria is in a way that they're already getting popular, but as well, especially mitigation. Mitigation is about to reduce greenhouse gases. So it's a kind of easy to calculate in a way. But how about adaptation? So you know that mitigation is to mitigate the risk of climate, to mitigate the climate change happen. Like for example, in the best. For example, the scenario in until 2100, we may face 4.5 degrees Celsius increase the temperature, or we can keep to 1.5 Celsius. But you know, it's not about only the matter of the temperature, but actually, as I already shown, that the risk of disaster is getting increasing because of it, because the unstableness of the environment is stability of environment is influenced by such changing of climate. So adaptation is anyway that we need to survive the situation after the climate change. Already we are predicting climate change. So but adaptation is about everything, like our wear. If we are too hot, then we can remove. Or it's also about our energy. It's also about our food, or disaster prevention. Or everything can be adaptation, but it's kind of quite tricky to deal with. So what I now trying to do is to structurizing adaptation more kind of accessible to and easier to understand. Currently, for example, IPCC report or in many aspects that often deal with adaptation strategy is in 4 categories, like terrestrial, sea, river, and human. But I believe adaptation is the relationship between our civilization and nature itself, since that our civilization needs to adapt. And also that the adaptation is originally the terminology from biological evolution. So yeah, that I feel some of the gap between the dealing of the world of adaptation from climate change side of point of view to biological science side of point of view. So I need to. I feel that it may be kind of a hint to learn from biological evolution or adaptive evolution kind of science to use as a proper metaphor for structurizing what kind of strategy can be possible to adapt our civilization to the coming changing environment. And I'm a maniac of adaptive evolution since that I'm a designer, but I often feel that we cannot compete with nature, since the nature design is really fantastic and it's so beautiful. As Maeda-san, my friend, was talked, she is the chair of the Matsuda design. But often we kind of we feel defeated by the natural design. So I'm kind of into natural design within this maybe 20 years. And and I learned a lot from adaptive evolution in nature. So, and one time that I felt that this can be used to know the whole structure of adaptation. And we constructed a 3-step, like how to define for the first the area to be adapted. That usually when you develop city, we often ignore the unit of nature, like the watershed. But it's kind of quite good to re-understanding small watershed, like 100 hectare, and set conservation area along with it. And also that we can set the kind of development area, and also we can calculate the capacity of water or saturation inside of each of the watershed. Then it should be much easier to prevent the whole, in a way, that the whole ecosystem or whole biodiversity in that area, since that biodiversity, the watershed is the unit also of the biodiversity in each area. So we are currently working together with Koajiro Forest in Miura Peninsula. That here is quite wonderful forest that they prevent the biodiversity. As for the most in kind of broader whole Tokyo area. Even that they have quite small forests. They only have 70 hectares. But as well that, I often working for example, the disaster prevention or renewable energy or circular economy, but, I wanted to structuralize what kind of structure is behind of such resilience or regenerative ecosystem or system. And I found that some of the function or most of the function can be found in our body. Like that if you observe your body, then you have perceptivity or recoverability or redundancy or cyclicity or flexibility or robustness. But our society is often only relying on robustness, like making the kind of hard wall like this building. But we may need to have more soft wall which has perceptivity or recoverability inside. Like, about perceptivity, we may be able to sense, for example, coming disaster, like using, for example, satellite. Or we can make a kind of recoverable concrete for making the building. Or also that, okay, let me skip that. Yeah, I'm also running the time. Yeah, these are my works, which is also relating to the recoverability. But anyway, and cyclicity, like for making a circular economy inside of the local community, since that is quite workable, not only for mitigating climate change, but also also increasing our resiliency. Since that you can so I'm also running the renewable energy company which tries to enhance the local usage of renewable energy, and also helping helping local revitalization of the place where the power plant is existing. We are currently dealing with about a billion kilowatt hour in total currently. We are currently quickly growing. And this is our office that, we can kind of circulate the locally developed debris to some beautiful interiors. And we can maybe apply some of the flexibility, like like the damper in this building also provides some flexibility. But as well, the usage of flexibility is also there. Like this is a face shield which I made with only 3 cuts from the usual A4 clear file. But this kind of I believe that this is also one part of flexibility that we can use the different purposes. And also robustness, like we can provide some of the robust structure like this concrete. But as well, not only that, not only such hardwares, but also we ourselves need to be resilient. But not only the adaptive evolution in body, but also every living organism evolved its behavior to be adapted to the situation, and we can learn from there. Like it's kind of difficult to read, but for example, we can supply memorability or predictability or mobility or communicability or cooperativity or observability of each person in local area. Then they may save their life by themselves. So it's about software. So actually, we can learn many things from the nature. Like we can also learn about hardware, but not only for that, we can learn software, how to act for coming disaster as well. And that we may need to more to be in nature that to know some strange situation happen or not. Or we can also so we are currently trying to give to make the application to measure the carbon score of each of the person, or also that we may be able to provide the memory of the past disaster. Skip, but or we can we can kind of teach some of the predictability that what kind of hint can be the hint of coming situation, or also we need to provide some way to move from there after the earthquake or after the flood. So the mobility will serve some of the resiliency as well. And of course, we need to cooperate, and we need to communicate as well. So, shall we skip? But anyway, what I would like to do is that for thinking about whole picture of adaptation is kind of tricky, but these kind of criteria can be used for rethinking about coming design. What kind of design can supply the resiliency of the society? And hopefully this metaphor, and this metaphor I believe is important, is that, adaptation is very, very important matter for everyone, literally from child to the adult. But because it's kind of complicating, so I believe that if we can use this kind of metaphor, then they can learn by your body, or by quite understandable situation in the nature. So we are currently working on this adaptation project for city planning in Indonesia or Philippines or some other places. So yeah, I hope to develop this project in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tachikawa-san. Many of the concepts he's pointed out can be further explored on the website. So if you are interested, please go and visit Adaptment website for further information. Thank you very much, Tachikawa-san. Then let's move on to Dwinita-san, and let me introduce Dr. Dwinita Larasati-san. Dwinita-san is a lecturer and a researcher at the Faculty of Art and Design Institute Teknologi Bandung. Dwinita-san serves as a Bandung City of Design focal point in the UNESCO Creative Cities Network and is on the executive committee of Indonesia Creative Cities Network as well. She's also a pioneering graphic artist and publishes a graphic diary. So if you could, okay, good. If you could start your presentation, that would be great.
Thank you. Thank you for the generous introduction. Yes. So designers all over the world have been trying to make the world better. And they do it bit by bit, maybe. And maybe if they have strong resources, they do it completely different. But there's a time where the whole world are forced to come to a halt. And then now when we start to ready to push play again, how do we do it? What happens? So this is when designers are forced to use their ability to really have a vision and try to make action plans and strategies of how to make it better. Do we go back to the old habit, or what can we do? Because if we have to rethink how the world works, and we already felt how the world didn't work, for example, suddenly there's no pollution because there's no emission from vehicles. And we have to reassess the impact of culture and art because suddenly we cannot go to concert, there's no cinema, it's depressing. Although we always consider entertainment as maybe tertiary needs, maybe the fourth need after food and shelter and clothing, but then we feel that without culture, without art, without creativity, mental breakdown. And then we have to accelerate the digital turn. Of course, people have been exposed to digital technology and so on, but then happens bit by bit. And people who don't have access stay inaccessible. But then when everyone's forced to, for example, do the schooling through internet, then you have to provide those internet to the remote area, to the any area that usually you don't think about, and so on. And we shift how we work and socialize, of course, because nobody's allowed to meet in person, not to hug, not to touch your friends and all. And then we actually lose the urban life, the hustle and bustle, the traffic jam, everything that we're used to. Then suddenly everybody has to stay separately. But then we also have a dilemma of older urgencies. When people are already getting used to talking in person, so no longer just talking to a screen, but then suddenly you have to go back to the screen again. Or when people start to realize that it's great to take public transport, then you reduce pollution. Suddenly it's not safe for anyone anymore, then you take your car again, and so on. And then, of course, there's production of food packages. We are getting used to getting food sent, delivered to our homes. Even those who are not used to buying food at home, they have to do it, and now they're getting used to it because of the convenience. So now we end up with all these packages and all. So this is actually derived from the talk of Charles Landry when during COVID, so we did this online webinar and so on. Also, this is a case of West Java. So Bandung is the capital city of West Java in Indonesia, and West Java is the most populated province. It has 50 million people. Indonesia in total has 270-something million people. So here in West Java, we found out that 80% SMEs had to close down, 14,000 something workers have to stay home and so on. But then we also see business that thrive during the pandemic. So those in the logistics, those in the communication, digital, internet, and those in food delivery, and also in wellness services. So I remember during the 3 years, the selling of bike is really high. So you have to, if you want to buy a Brompton, for example, you have to wait 2 months or so, then you can get yours. So it's really a trend of people getting back to herbal food, organic, and so on and so on. So where can designers take part in this? How can we enhance the positiveness of lifestyle that is getting popular among people? So how do we proceed? So what I'm going to show after this is our experience is when designers take part in making policy recommendation, action strategy, and so on at the higher level. Because we saw that if we talk if we succeed to have the theme of creativity, creative economy, creative industries, including design, on the higher level, then you can get a systemic impact after that. And this is just a model of how future designers should think. Because as designers, we have these tools. We have our skills, very tangible skills, including sketching to 3D designing and so on. We have our empathy, which is what design thinking is always on about and what we need to make a human-centered development. We have our design thinking, which is too important to be left to designers only, so we have to share that to everybody. And we have our attitude, because designers still have their ego. A lot of good designers of mine, friends, those who really with good brands and all, they all have their ego to, of course, they have to have personality and so on, and so on. So designers are equipped with this, but then they have to also understand the context, because they want their design to be used. They want their design to be desirable. So they have to know the context, but then they have to know also the new narratives. So here designer is like a Superman who always have to consider everything in whatever they do. So within the context and the new narratives, they would have these future visions, because the designers are trained to make a scenario of how things can be. So they don't explain how things are, but they always have this imagination that should be workable. But then they are also faced with these future challenges. Serious things are, for example, climate, that also includes natural disasters and so on, food security, energy, health, and so on. And going back to the bottom, the result of designers, it can be objects, artifacts, it can be services, guidelines, it can be systems or programs, including policies and frameworks. And these should answer the future challenges. That's why the arrow is going up. So what I'm talking about next is also inclined to discuss about how we do it at the Global South. So this is the first attempt to have creativity discussed on the table at the global level through G20. So in G20 2022, which was in Riyadh, one of the policy papers argues that creative economy is a sector that can provide inclusive and sustainable jobs for the future, for the youth and women and people with different abilities and so on. So this little blue person, if you see it, that's supposed to represent a creative person or creative people that have to answer the SDGs, and it's going through these challenges. because it was written in 2020. The biggest challenge then was the pandemic, of course. But this blue person is equipped with the skills, the knowledge. It's supported by the financial institutions and so on. And by using technology, so it has to go through the T, it actually can create future job. So inclusive creative economy and the future of work. In this paper, we argue that every creative person have these main attributes that can help them create the future. So first, they have the interpersonal ability in creative economy ecosystem. So they don't see themselves as I'm the CEO or I'm the director, I'm the boss of everyone, but they see their function, their role in a community. They have high order cognitive skill. They don't want to be the same as others. Okay, you design good, I can design better. So they always look for originality, personal experience oriented, and they have also unique narratives. And also, the third one is they are usually technologically savvy. So everything that comes, then they usually always want to explore. And this helps in creating the future. And that's the argument for 2020. Next, when it was held in Italy, there's a think tank 20. They also produced this Creative Economy 2030. By then, the pandemic is still on. So we are looking into other possibilities how creativity can help build the future. So first, there should be synchronization of standards, protocols, and definitions. Because as I mentioned before, if you talk about creativity to people at higher level, bureaucrats, politicians, those decision makers, they usually think of it as entertainment, leisure time, and so on, which is not serious. That's why it's not too interesting for impact investors, for example. It's just an entertainment. So there should be an understanding that creativity is serious business, and if you do it well, you can provide for many people. And also we discuss about informal workers. At the Global South, usually it's dominated by SMEs, small and medium enterprises, whose workers are not always, say, formal workers as in definition of the most developed countries. They can be like vendors, they can be like people with no certificate or no formal paper to say that they are this kind of workers or that kind of workers. So we need to find a form where you can really aggregate this kind of different workers so they can be counted in the facilities as well. There, of course, there's a question of promotion of digital literacy that provides work also for youth, because the Global South are mostly dominated by youth in their demographic. And there's also recognition of the importance of culture in strategy for sustainability for all. This is also about inclusive creative economy that should involve everyone. The year after, G20 was hosted by Indonesia, and we were involved in the Urban 20 policy recommendation. So there are 7 points, mostly has to do with creative city and all, but we emphasize also on informal economy in the city, and also circular creative economy in the city and so on. So the conversation keeps going on. This discussion is being carried on at that level. But then there's also this Asian Development Bank Institute. They also held this policy brief about people and the next economy. And here the argument is still looking at the Global South, where the majority of workers are not registered as formal workers. Because, because I'm in the Global Creative Economy Council, and it is obvious that for us in the Global South, informal economy means this kind of SME, informal workers, and so on, who are sometimes hired to do jobs. While in the developed countries, informal workers usually means freelancers or those who don't want to pay taxes. But that's not the case for us. So that's why, for example, if we have festivals or if we have a traditional huge event, usually these women, children, whoever, they make decorations, but they don't have the certificate as, for example, decoration maker. So you cannot count them in a formal way. This is how we need intermediary organizations, and government should also provide easier tasks for them. And then this is the global creative economy council I talk about. So we produced this in 2021. We presented this in the World WCC, World Conference on Creative Economy in Dubai. We have 11 points that actually also bring up the role of the creatives in the development strategy. This is among the last ones from the policies. WCC was held in Bali again for the 3rd time last year, and we came up with a roadmap that actually provide options or references for countries who want to proceed with their creative economy, whether answering current state or for future landscape, or for conceptual ideas or concrete action. And here, each country can choose which fits them most. But then for Indonesia, it's these yellow boxes. The one that are marked with a red check is, among others, is embracing the roles and contribution of informal economy into the creative economy aggregators. This is to involve a majority of our SMEs into the bigger industrial scenarios. And also culture-based innovative experiments and future discoveries. And this is because we still have a lot of cultural resources, traditions, and so on, that is not explored enough as our capital for developing creative economy. After this, I will give some examples of what we mean by those. So this 6 circle says, I hope it really represents the global south. So usually we have high diversity of natural and cultural resources that are not all explored yet. We are usually youth dominated. Every time we open a job or something, we have to make sure that is as labor intensive as possible. And usually also in the form of micro and small enterprises, so not as a huge brand or company, but usually smaller ones, but then organized in an aggregation. We should use appropriate technology in a sense that we talk about digital era, digital access and so on. We have a huge disparity, so a lot of people don't have access to that, but then those who have should also use that actually to provide or to promote jobs for the ones who don't. And here I wrote scale and balance because usually designers also, if they use this technology, they use the resources, they have to check if their supply and demand is in balance, or if their material supplies and so on also in order, because our challenge is also the natural depletion with all the disasters, all the illegal logging, all the forest fires and so on. So we have to make sure of that. And this is just an example of what we did. It's done by different entities. Some are universities, some are brands, but then this is by young people who already realized that they can no longer rely solely on natural resources. So they don't rely on economic activity that is based on extracting natural resources, so no more digging minerals, cutting trees, but let's use our creativity to create, to touch these issues. So about plastic waste, about food security, and how would you make diversity in food again, and how would you reduce the waste. And also if you do fashion, how you do it responsibly, and also using digital technology for equality. And there's this is some from campus and some from communities. So we also created vegan leather from mushroom, and then this is from betel palm, because there are hectares and hectares of these plants, and the leaves is just left there to burn. So we made kind of dyes to make plates and all. And we use also natural materials like bamboo to make prosthetics and to make other products. And immersive experience, we did it in an open space. So it's a concept for post-pandemic edutainment tourism destination and so on. And also it is important to have higher level institutions like a ministry. So for example, This is the Ministry of Corporation and Small Medium Enterprises. So at their basement, this is actual basement of their office, so it's a huge one. They built a future small and medium enterprise lab. And this is to actually provide, because small and micro enterprise, they don't have a budget to do R&D for their products, starting from the food and beverage business to craft and so on. So this ministry helped them develop their products out of charge. So they can come like saying, okay, I have this kind of rice, but I want to make it taste like so. Can you develop it here? Or, okay, we have this kind of new variation of material. Can we develop it like so? So this ministry have this lab for future mobility, craft, fashion, and food. And it's important that they have they supported this kind of direction. And go back to here. I think those can fit some of these boxes, and then we are still developing in that way. And it's important that to have the synergy of different stakeholders to make this happen. And with this, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since we have some time left, additional time left, I would like to ask you one simple question. You did mention something about synchronizations of the circular economy principles and ideas to the global south, activities in the global south, whilst acknowledging the high diversity of the cultural and natural resources in the global south. How do you sort of move between these two? The global north-led design and development principles on one hand, on the other hand, you are also acknowledging the cultural and the ecological diversity of the region you are working in.
To make it more clear, maybe I use an example. So a clear example is that in Bandung, we have an area for manufacturing a multinational brand of fashion. I don't mention the brand, but there's plenty. So Bandung is actually a place for production. But then you see, if you go to the brand's website, they say, we practice sustainable, blah, blah. But then in reality, if you come to that area, it's so sad that they pollute the river, they pollute the soil. Every day we have tons of fabric waste and so on. While people come to work there, there's the area, one factory is about 20 to 25,000 people. So how they live is really not very humane. So then we did the research and so on and so on. So we want to build that area into a healthier, happier area. But that's not possible because at the beginning, because the local government tend to say, okay, we cannot do anything about it. The factory owner also, oh no, I will keep my workers. The international brand said, oh yeah, we care about that, but they don't do anything. But they don't want this to be published. So anyway, so synergy is then the community is doing it themselves, because then we do the research, mapping and so on. If you Google it up, we have this online already. So it's called Fashion Village Lab in Cigonewa in Bandung. So we did some efforts. We asked the local people to express what they want, and then we built or we established a cooperation institution with the women, so they can have capital for their because if they don't work in the factory, outside the factory, they also work something else. They do catering, they do other businesses. So it's that kind of development, although it's very small because it's an area just in Bandung. But I think you can do most of that in factories, other factories in other places, as long as you know which part you can tap on. I hope that helps.
Okay, quite interesting in the context of the autonomous designing, in that you are really acting the front edge of the participatory design practices. It's not really just about asking people what they want. You ask, just like Tachikawa-san's argument of the adaptment, you are encouraging the agent to optimize itself. So to that end, I think it's quite interesting, and it can be the new emerging sort of design concept, I thought, which is great. Thank you very much. So let's move on finally to the Monika-san. Monika Koncz-MacKenzie-san is from a United Kingdom, but I believe your family name is a German and Scottish one. Hungarian German. Hungarian Scottish. Okay. Multinational. So, Monika-san is the Senior Design and Innovation Manager at Ellen MacArthur Foundation. After completing her MA at the University of Bonn, she worked as a UK-based leadership consultant focusing on culture, change, and innovation. Currently, she aids senior design leaders in promoting a circular economy. So, Monika, if you'd like to introduce your case, that'd be great.
Thank you. Well, yeah, my name is Monika Koncz-MacKenzie, and yeah, I'm very excited to be here today. First time in Japan as well. So, yeah, so I'm bringing the perspective to this conversation that to regenerate the Earth, we need to design for a circular economy. And so at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we believe that by design, we can eliminate waste and pollution, circulate materials and products for as long as possible, and regenerate nature to create an economy that benefits people, the planet, and businesses. And here you see the 3 principles again, but in Japanese. So yeah, the circular economy is a world-changing idea, and it captivated academia, governments, and businesses. And it's got a huge momentum and commitment behind it. And it provides so this is the butterfly diagram you can also find in English on our website. It provides a system solution framework that tackles global challenges and is able to address some of the big challenges we're facing right now, such as climate change, biodiversity loss, and waste and pollution. But let's go back to where we are now. So today, the economic system we live in is a take, make, waste linear economy. So resources in at the beginning and waste out at the end. And this linear economy is hugely extracting, so producing greenhouse gas emissions that are fueling the climate crisis that we are in. And also the linear economy does not manage resources such as land use, water use, and resources such as minerals on the long term. So we all agree, I think, that we need to move from this linear economy to a circular one. And now it's really time to move from ambition into action. So how can circular economy tackle climate change, and what role does design play? We often tend to look primarily at how energy is produced, is used when we look at greenhouse gas emissions. Research at the foundation has shown that 45% of the emissions actually come from the way products are produced and used. And so when we look at this, we need to address. So in order to address these 45% of the emissions, we need to fundamentally look at how we are approaching value creation in the first place. And we need to look at how we are building on the 3 fundamental principles. So designing our waste and pollution to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the value chain, keeping products and materials in use to retain the energy embodied, and regenerating natural systems to sequester carbon, soil, and products. And the circular economy is really also about harnessing design to reimagine and recreate systems where services, goods flow through the economy. And in this way, it can help us tackle climate change and tackle the interconnected global crisis that we are facing. So design is fundamental to creating a more regenerative future. And to address the root causes of the linear economy, we need to go upstream and look at the way we produce and use things. So from the clothes we wear to the buildings we live in, to the systems that deliver food, all of that is designed around us and also can be redesigned. And decisions made at the design stage set in motion how products are being made, used, and whether it stays in the economy and produces value over long term or whether they're being wasted. So once, the last thing to point out, and you wonder why there's this egg, once designed, it's hard to reverse, so you can't unscramble an egg. Design is a force for change, from innovative products to disruptive business models, to redesigning entire companies and value chains. And design has the power to reshape our economy. And at the foundation, we have a focus on design in different sectors, such as plastics, fashion, and food. So let's stay with food to give you an example. What if food could tackle climate change? What if food could build biodiversity? We asked these questions in our latest design-led report. Today, just 3 crops, rice, corn, and wheat, provide 60% of the world calories. And the way it's grown and how it's grown is hugely extractive. A circular economy applied to the food systems could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 49% by 2050. So rather bending nature to produce food, how could food be produced and designed for nature to thrive? As part of the food redesign research, we applied a speculative design approach and created 4 concepts for food products from a nature-positive, regenerative future. The aim was to help business leaders and investors to imagine what the future could look like, what this circular future of food could look like. And this product here is one of the 4 explored, where we designed and which were designed in collaboration with farmers for nature. So we all, love good food, and we know it's essential. But we also value good clothes, and so jeans, the jeans redesign project, is a really interesting one. But before going into that project, just maybe to highlight again what we're facing here. So the fashion industry is a huge polluter and a huge contributor to the climate crisis. So as we speak, every second a truckload of textiles is being landfilled or incinerated. And this is why this example that I'm about to bring is hugely important. So this is a multi-stakeholder project that started in 2019. And it didn't just focus on the redesign of this hugely iconic product of jeans, which we can all relate to, and was part of the reason it was chosen in the first place. But it also recognized that we needed to look at the systems redesign here around the product for it to work. So it brought together various actors from the system to look at how they could redesign that together and make it happen. So when we started this project, jeans were very hard to reuse or recycle. And the Foundation's fashion team worked with an initial group of 16 companies to develop circular guidelines to redesign jeans. So a few years later, and here the output, redesigned jeans followed these principles. To be used more, made to be made again, and made from safe, recycled, and renewable inputs. And about 500,000 redesigned jeans were brought to market between 19 to 21. After 4 years of the project, participation in that Jeans Redesign project has grown from 16 to 100 participants from across the value chain, from fabric mills, garment manufacturers, brands, and retailers from 25 countries and literally all continents of the world. And yeah, here you can see all the participating organizations. The project demonstrated how circular design can become the new norm in the fashion industry. More than 1/3 of the participants reported that these new principles they also started applying in other garments, such as jackets or shirts or bags and hats. So, and whenever I speak to I work a lot with the fashion companies, there's still new stories that come up all the time. So there's a snowball effect that started, which is really great to see. And 2/3 of the participants shared that they have circular business model pilot schemes in place. So yeah, but one thing to highlight, and that was the very part of the design of that project in the first place, is that without systems change, the progress that has started to happen in some way cannot be sustained and cannot be realized in the long term. Oh yeah, and then the other thing to highlight is that from 21 to 23, 1.5 million redesigned jeans were put on the market, so massive growth from the initial number. So yeah, back to the systemic change, and we therefore need to realize that we need more people and more designers to take leadership. And this is where our recent report, the Adaptive Strategy for Circular Design, comes in. So designers are key influencers, and we heard that already in the previous presentations, but yeah, designers are key influencers in designing products and services, business models, and systems so that they can be regenerative by design. They help us create empowering visions, they inspire and guide us, they help us move into new directions. And like Aisha said, I don't know who was there yesterday, but Aisha presented in her keynote that designers can help find space to imagine. So this is really about creating the spaces to reimagine the way we live, work, and consume. But designers are also in the position to ask critical questions and act more systemically, challenge current assumptions. Unfortunately, though, designers are underutilized when it comes to organizational redesign. Their skills in user research, in seeing the system, facilitating collaboration, developing skills, prototypes, creating useful tools, setting new rules could be used a lot more to help organizations shift and create these enabling conditions. We've recently talked a lot about linear lock-ins and organizational lock-ins that actually prevent even senior leaders and senior design leaders to take effective action, and is a massive problem. So that leads me to the last section of my presentation. Within the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, I have the pleasure to work with circular design leaders, a group of critical design influencers from across various industries who are driving the adoption of circular design in their organizations. So they are from these following organizations, and they're senior leaders such as chief design officers, global vice presidents, directors, or heads of design, often with hundreds of design team members or coming from innovation, working from various geographies underneath them. So the group was set up to help designers feel more connected and more empowered, and building circular economy momentum and action in their organization. So what's their role? They work with organizational leadership, they empower their teams, and communicate circular design progress to wider audiences. And in 2021, I initiated a new, more hands-on approach with this group, running annual iterative design sprints to inspire effective systems-level interventions and to help them embed circular design practice into their operations. And these are some pictures from our latest sprint this September, where we explored new forms of value creation, which is a very important topic to the circular design leaders, where we used systems modeling approaches on specific company cases that the design leaders brought to the sprint, and help them better understand how they can shift from a linear operational model to a more circular one. So this process was inspired by an immersive experience and time and observations in nature at the beginning of the process, and help them to rethink the design process they apply and have them be more underpinned by living systems principles from nature. I'm very grateful that I get to design and facilitate these processes with circular design leaders. I love their passion and their commitment. They're hugely ambitious, and I'm also really humbled to see how every year when the circular design leaders come together, they form a really strong vision and the alignment that fosters the mindset and the culture change we would love to see in the organizations. But also it helps them to inspire their leaders, senior leaders and executives to be part of that collective movement that we need towards a regenerative future that we'd all be thrilled to live in. So I invite you all to be a circular design leader within your own context, within your own organization. Maybe you want to download the adaptive strategy for some inspiration or some of the other resources. Influence your own communities, organizations. I'm around. I'd love to speak to you if you're interested. And arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you very much.
ありがとうございました。ありがとうございました。Since we've got 10 minutes-ish left until the 30 minutes break, I think we should wrap up a little bit about the presentation. First and foremost, Monika-san, there are a few interesting words that you used to describe the activities relating to the design for circular economy, circular design. One is living system theory. Another is the systemic design. I do understand that especially the systemic design is becoming quite a big thing in the UK, but it's not the major term to be used in Japan at least. So if you explain a little bit about that first and foremost, and also how that relates to the living system theory kind of idea, I think it would be really good to elaborate a little bit more, to maybe to explain a little bit more about the nature of regenerative design, or what you mean by regeneration, what the regenerative future.
Okay, right. So I wonder which order do I take now? So when we talk about, so we had the living systems principles, regenerative future,
and systemic design.
Systemic design, yeah. So maybe a personal story that might help, probably on all three actually. When I spent some time in Brazil, and I spent a lot of time there. It was one of those nature reserves, and I got to walk around in this beautiful environment, spent a lot of time in the local forests as well. And I at some point had, I suppose, you could call it epiphany, but I was in this beautiful little clearing, and I could see how it was very dense with life of all sorts. You had maybe a fallen tree that was rotting, but at the same time you saw all sorts of mushrooms grow in it. Right. You saw another tree in full bloom, but also had must have had another 12 different species of other plants grow on it, and they all sort of seem beautifully, in a symbiotic relationship. I'm throwing on more words, but in harmony with each other, growing together. Let's put it that way. And so there's really something beautiful to see around the life cycles, around how one feeds the other, and how they're in this sort of harmonious state, which might not always be the case, right? So I'm not saying all of nature's in this beautiful harmonious state, and there are predators and there's food that's eaten and all of it. But the point is that I think for me that was that sort of experience of living systems where it's not predefined, like this is exactly what it has to be. You could it can emerge a certain way where you don't expect it, and there you could see principles. Continuous feedback loops is something that you hear a lot in systems conversations and other things, and there's something around the living that also as referring to nature, that you can't predict. You can't say this is exactly how it's meant to be. It's more like this linear process we often talk about, right? Like and that very much business as usual is living in, like where you have that exact plan and you follow, but even then, things don't always happen according to plan. And I think that might be the easiest way maybe to relate to that inspiration. And in terms of regenerative future, often when we talk about sustainability, and the word sustain probably captures it, is sort of the sustain what is, and that just brings us that far. And maybe when things were still thriving more in nature in the past, that word made sense, but now we are, with all the previous data we looked at from the presentations, we moved maybe beyond that stage where we see the amount of species getting extinct, or when we see like water being affected, and all the sustaining that is probably not good enough. And so we need to look at how can we help to restore what used to be there, and to create, not because of the sake that's what it needs to be, what it was, but because of we want planetary health, and that's what we all need to survive, not just the species that might be extinct, but even humans could potentially be extinct if we don't regenerate. So that's why I think regeneration helps to get us to that place of action and a certain level of urgency that we need to have.
I see. So whilst we acknowledge the certain sort of level of urgency, because of the nature of the interdependence or interconnectedness of the living system, the nature, not as an environment, it's quite difficult to intervene, but still the intervention has to be made in order to regenerate it. So whilst on one hand we are talking about protection and conservation of the nature, we are at the same time trying to come up with better ways of the intervention. Is that the clear statement to say? Is that fair?
Yeah, improve what you do, but also maybe do more. So there's this really great, and that came from, I don't know if it was Kate Rayworth or Janine Benyus, the founder of the biomimicry. But basically it was that sort of three mindsets from what can I get away with? So people don't notice that I'm doing potentially harm here, which is maybe what still a lot of companies still function that kind of way of thinking about it, to how can I reduce the harm or the damage, which is probably, again, a lot of companies would be still in that frame of mind, and possibly individuals as well. To the last one is how can I do good and actually regenerate. And I think that's another way of looking at it, and that's probably the one we need to look at. So not just maybe slightly improve what we're doing here, but how can we do extra to, and there are great examples from the built environment on buildings being developed, designed that actually are nature positive, meaning that they provide ecosystem services like nature would, like capture carbon, purify water, sequester, purify soil. So there's all these sorts of nature services that we can actually design in our infrastructure. So there are great examples to show that we can actually regenerate even with the normal everyday things like building streets, etc.
I see. on the other hand, nevertheless, maybe, we don't know exactly how we were intervening the nature. Therefore, the end result is not always the thing that we expect to see. So if that's the case, it's quite difficult for us to come up with some kind of design principles or some kind of design, attitude, yes, maybe, but design principles, design methods, and design tools, it seems quite difficult, or sometimes even like a contradictory to come up with those things. But how do you respond to the idea as such? The emergence versus the systematic sort of intervention into the uncertain.
Thank you very much for the question, but can I add one thing more about the systemic way of observation? Since that recently, as you may know, that there's a legendary book, Limit to Growth, from 50 years ago about, and that was a kind of quite the beginning of the movement of ecology. But within that book, actually recently I got the original copy of that book, and you can buy in the street actually the copy currently. But actually in that book there is a model, World 3, and that is a kind of interrelated system of how the economy works. And because of such connection, they predict that limit will come. And behind of that system, behind of drawing that map, actually there was a kind of the methodology to modeling such system, which is called system dynamics. Which is about 50 years ago. But yeah, I often find that actually we already have many of the tools to understand the current situation, but we often forgot. Actually, this problem is not started from now, but it's already keep fighting 50 years, more than that, actually. But it's sometimes it's ignored. Sometimes it's kind of opposed. But currently, many of conclusion or many of the facts shows that we really need to face this problem. So actually, we may need to find out what kind of tool we have already, and also that there are many of legendary scientists or great ancestors who are approaching in many ways. Like Donner Meadows or the J. Forrester did with system dynamics as well. But not only system dynamics, but many were, like, for example, the word ecology is from Ernst Haeckel, who is about 150 years ago. But we are kind of continuing tackle of this problem, I think.
Can I just add one more thing, which I think would help a lot with that sort of questions. So the often when what we compare is a closed loop model versus the more regenerative sort of model, the living systems perspective. And when you think about also how businesses approach it, and what we encourage them to do is actually not just look at it from a very mechanistic perspective, because you could say, if I'm Apple and iPhone producer, that I close the loop, and this is where this closing the loop comes in, but it's still sort of linear, that I just collect all the Apple phones back and make new Apple phones, right? And then you can say job done, there's no waste produced and all of that. In some way you could say but then when you look at it in nature, like an owl that is dying and deceasing is not becoming a new owl, right? And if you have and when you look at the creation of soil and what goes into making compost to grow new food, a lot goes in for a lot of different things to come out. It's not just one thing that cycles. And the same, I think, is something that, and there are concepts coming from industrial ecology where that is being seen already in Karlenberg in Denmark, where what comes out of one company in terms of output or waste can be used by another one. And so there is this sort of, again, I'm using the symbiotic relationship, but there's something around that is not closed loop, and that is actually allowing for the community of different players in this sort of system, this sort of field of action, to work together, to collaborate, and to move together, because it wouldn't work just for one or two businesses to say, we are now 100% circular. It would never work. So this is why that linear circular model would not work, that mechanistic model. Sorry, I just had to add that.
No, that's great. Thank you. I mean, I think the issue is more or less like in this context, the multi-stakeholder network or meshwork development, which is super difficult, and those design methods and principles to achieve that, and that itself is quite difficult. So everyone knows it, but not so sure about how to implement it, or who the actual agents of change are, and so on and so forth. So we maybe know how to deal with it, but how to actually implement it is maybe the issue we need to face for the session after the break. So yeah, it's about time, isn't it? So we'll have a break for roughly for half an hour, and we'll resume the session from 4 o'clock. Thank you. Right, welcome back to the second half of the World Design Assembly Tokyo 2023 session planet. Yes. It's a long phrase to say in one go, but anyway, from this session onwards, we'd like to have a Marianne-san, who was on stage this morning. And first and foremost, together with Marianne-san, I'd like to reflect a little bit about the session we've just had. It seems to me that the previous session, the 3 presentations, were focused on the transition from how we design for making profit for a small minority of groups to how we make a mutual benefit for a larger number of communities, a society, or maybe transitioning towards even larger scope to the design for symbiosis of the nature and natural and the built environment, maybe. But as we try and expand the scope of designing further and further out, the existing knowledge of the design tools and methods cannot sort of cope with that. Therefore, you need to go back and look at the the origin of the ecology or ecological design, which has been around for many years, but but they are not actively used for many reasons, as we already discussed. So whilst we all acknowledge the necessity, the urgency of designing for planet on one hand, on the other hand, we know that it's not the really easy task because of the balancing all this multi-stakeholder equilibrium, as it were. But how would you respond to the presentations and the kind of arguments we've had so far?
Well, first, what an amazing session. And really, I want to thank you, as the three of you, for giving us so many tools, so many insights on how design can act for the planet. And as you were saying, now we are at a stage where we need to scale up, solutions. We need to really have impact at a large scale to address the pressing environmental issues. Really, I think this session showed us how creativity can be essential in finding innovative ways of engaging communities, companies, and territories at large. So we are not only in the field of product design, we are in the field of designing societies. And it's really absolutely fantastic on how Eisuke showed us innovative tools to address the issue of resilience. Because, we saw this climate is a global issue that have various and very diverse local impact. So meaning that each community will have to address these issues differently. And Eisuke came with incredible tools because also he made these tools available, at the level of reach and understanding of people. Meaning that he actually applied the skills of a designer, who thinks about the user, about the stakeholders, and how these tools can be actually implemented tangibly, So how ideas, concept can be really translated into action that will have an impact, positive impact for the resilience of communities. So it was an incredible demonstration. And I think also Dwinita really spoke about the creativity, the role of creative industries in change, in awareness, change, and solutions. Well, actually, designers are part of these creative industries, meaning that also they impact our culture. They impact our values, and they can communicate very effectively, to people in an inspiring way. So that's actually a very, very important concept because we can see that climate is usually thought about in terms of science, policy, economics, and culture and creativity are not necessarily up in the agenda. And Dwinita showed us how in community in the South, people can be empowered with creative tools and cultural tools. And of course, Monika also talked about the importance of mobilizing large companies and how leadership, can actually scale up also the circular transformation of companies, industries, and that have, also large impacts, whether it's positive, but it can be also, negative. So it's also a huge, huge challenge. and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and Monika are doing an incredible job. So I think it was really an enlightening session.
Good, thank you. What I liked about, first and foremost, about Monika-san's presentation was the fact that, yes, we know about linear to circular, first and foremost. Closing the loop was one design strategies that we know, but the Monika-san says explicitly that it's not the only way to deal with the circular economy. We have to slow down and we have to narrow down the amount of the goods that are circulating. And she mentioned something new today, which is about connecting the loop. Different loops like a whirlpool. So that I think is quite interesting because that's related to what Dwinita-san said about the rise of the small to medium-sized enterprise intervening in these creative cultural activities. Because dealing with this multiple whirlpools or vortex circles, or whatever it is, interconnected, interwoven of loops, it's not quite easy for a major companies to collaborate, I imagine. But rather than that, it makes better sense if it is the collaborations between the numerous informal sectors, especially the small medium enterprises, SMEs. So connecting the loops, a great idea. And if you want to develop this some kind of emergent networks of the stakeholders, then it is the responsibility, or it is the advantage for the nations in the global south to deal with it, maybe because of the numbers of the SMEs. So that was the kind of interesting sort of insight I came up with. But at the end of this session, we need to come up with some takeaways.
You are the moderator.
I'm moderating the next session.
You need to go
to sum up all the findings. Yeah. So towards that kind of aims and objectives, we'd like to sort of somehow narrow down the interesting findings and so on and so forth. But how would you respond to the insights and inspirations and things you found so far?
Well, what I think in terms of some of the principles maybe that came through, but we didn't explicitly name all the time. But I think one of them is the bringing diverse actors together, and that symbiosis, or that sort of how does that create a more powerful mix to all benefit, right? So and having these mutual beneficial relationships, which again is an inspiration from nature, and we see that already happening even in the corporate world, where you think it might be harder because it's more elbow mentality and competition, but even there you even see competitors collaborate on certain themes because they know it's better for them. So Coca-Cola and Pepsi collaborate maybe on certain standardization or certain kind of campaigns because they know if we do it together, we actually both benefit from it. And a chemistry company with a battery producing company with somebody else. So there are lots of examples, and I think, but you can also see that with different size companies, from large corporate to small medium enterprises to like policymakers, etc. And for example, in the plastics team, they work on reuse and refill right now. And work with looking at how we can actually, for the entire industry, create that new infrastructure so reuse and refill is actually possible. And so talking about, what are the sort of, possibly maybe similar to jeans redesign, but what are the sort of criteria that needs to be in place? What are the sort of kind of the obstacles we need to overcome? And so all of that is possible, and there's something that I think combines the three conversations here in that, isn't it?
Yeah, seems that way to me. If you'd like to add.
Yeah, I'd like to take the angle of the context again, because what I presented is mostly, of course, our point of view of Indonesia with 17,000 more islands. Our challenge is always logistics, always. So that's why disparity is always there, because you cannot distribute equal services, basic services, education, health, whatever else, So yeah, that has become our concern. So that's why what is presented, those images you saw, they are actually solutions, but at local level or prototypes. And as you can see, that's what designers do, offer prototypes of solutions. But then from prototype, all designers know, to go to production takes a lot of effort and commitments. And that's what we don't have. So actually, considering Planet, we have solutions, we have examples that work. But then in order to make them scaling up, as you say, so people can also practice within their own area, takes many things, not only money, but also commitment of the local leaders and so on. And that's hard to get because most of the time, political interests come in, capital interests coming in and so on. While at the Global South, our biggest capital is social capital. So that's what we should actually put attention to. So how we can include this cars of informal economy into a bigger locomotive and so on. How we can direct, that's why Indonesia has this policy of decentralization instead of everything centralized. We turn to decentralized so everybody can take care of their own circular area because they are islands anyway. And we really felt this during the pandemic where all borders are closed. So you have to make do with what you have in your environment. And it turned out that it's not always easy. It is actually difficult. So that's why words like integration, synergy, collaboration, we have to see the whole thing as an ecosystem of production of design for the better.
I came up in kind of two of the concepts along with this conversation. One is that, as Monika-san have said, that if we connect two of the whirlpools together, then we need to doubt the predetermined value of the product or the waste. Since that waste is because there's no meaning, predetermined meaning, like for example, afterward this will be meaningless because it's already after I drank the water, then it's meaningless because the carrying the water is this purpose. But if we can find the other purpose, like for example musical instrument or the other, then it can have prolonged life, or in some place that there is a kind of next adapted situation. But we often forgot, or we often kind of ignore such chance, but just throwing away. So often I feel that the circular economy is about creativity to refine the purposes, and that is, I think, all the designer's role. Since that we are setting the purpose to the object usually, so we can of course set the purpose to the waste as well. So one thing I came up is that, and the other thing I came up from Tita-san's talk is that I reminded that you often adaptive evolution can happen in island. Because they need to isolated in reproduction if they evolve in each that speciation will occurs, then such isolation of reproduction needed. But as well that such remote island of course need to be saturated inside in many things, like of course water or waste or energy. So in that case, currently Indonesia is quite growing fast, and as well the population is so big already. So because of it, that you need to kind of develop the industry as well. But such industry can be circular industry, since that is quite appropriate to solving its own local solutions. So that is kind of amazing that, we can kind of try to calculate the impact of, for example, if you construct the usual infrastructure in the modern city way, then it can be very, very expensive. But, if it's circulated, then it can be reduced as well, that you may have a chance, or the Indonesian company may have the chance to develop the new industry.
Just another perspective, because if you are coming up around diversity or around looking at a local scale and what can be done within community, and there's just a sort of story to demonstrate that, how this is actually spreading this sort of awareness and maybe the recognition of its importance, is when I recently visited Jaguar Land Rover and their design studio, and we were presented with their latest efforts, but really amazing things as well, what they're doing. At the end, we were given a book, and that book is called The Good Ancestor. And it was given to the design leaders from their chairman, so that he was very inspired by that book and gave it to all the senior leaders. And it's bringing in that future ancestor perspective. And when I knew I came to Japan and I looked for interesting case studies of what's happening in Japan, I actually found out that there is a group in Japan that is bringing that future voice into their design work as well, of actually acting out that future and being this, or you have that sometimes in a boardroom on a sort of decision making of having, one person represent the future, and so there's something in there of bringing that perspective in before you start designing, and if you work with particular clients or the kind of who you design for, they might ask for certain things, but what's the role of the designer here to bring that perspective in, if that perspective is missing for your client, for example?
I like the philosophy from native Indian, 7th generation. Yeah, that is about to talk. Actually, there's a ritual to talk with 7 generations away from the past and from the future. In the kind of festival, actually you need to talk with this disguised person who are 7 generations away. So in that case, that how do you think that you may react in quite different way? Like you may apologize, as a representative of this generation, and as well that you may kind of thank to the inheritance of the land. So that is a kind of very small trick of how we can expand our perceptivity, since that our perceptivity is quite limited to the next person and tomorrow or today. But we may be able to set such kind of new design in behavior to realize more intimate for such faraway generations, or a broader sense of the area.
Quite interesting, because some of my friends, the graduates from the Royal College of Art, are working specifically on that for our sustainable future, basically. So in the context of circular economy or circular design or design for transition, the Anab Jain from Superflux, to be specific, she's working on a design called Ancillary Design, which basically uses this future scenario to for the people to imagine or reimagine the present and the possible future, therefore backcasting to redefine our preferable future. Of course, it's a prototype. It's never the fixed solution. So it's the starting point to reimagine what the regenerative future might look like. So I think it's quite important to that end to not to think about the user. Up until now, or not now, but when this human-centered design logic was quite dominant, everyone was talking about second-order understanding, i.e., designers need to understand what users are understanding. But now we need to go beyond that. We need to understand how the ancestors interacted with the nature, or how we will interact in the future. Just like this morning's presentation, which is like a 3rd century. It's quite a far future, but still, to be able to do that, I think we need a special mindset, capability, creativity to deal with those things. And of course, it's not just about the roles and responsibilities of the designers. It's also the participants, everyone's capability to reimagine that.
As you may already use ChatGPT or the other AI services, but recently I realized that they can disguise anyone. For example, if you ask them, now you are the scholar, famous scholar, so you need to write down the paper, then they will disguise that. And I think that it may be possible for them, I mean AI, to disguise 7 generations away. I mean, from ancestors' point of view, So such kind of, some artificial, in a way, intelligence who are representing generations away, then it can be the interface to understand more easily, or also that you can literally talk with them. Such kind of solution can be very, very easily acquirable currently because of the current technology.
I see. Anything you want to add?
Well, maybe just what you were saying made me think of empathy, which was mentioned.
Yeah.
And empathy made me think also of the importance of nature connection.
Yeah.
And we heard that yesterday in a presentation around which was also bringing in the idea of biomimicry and connecting to a place and the environment in a way that brings about new insights and new ways of relating and seeing things that actually is quite important. And we do that as an initial step of the sprint processes we've done with the cycle designers before we go into the design journey to help bring about that mindset change at the beginning of the process from which you design in a different way. And I think there's something around these sorts of nature connection practices that help us stay grounded, stay connected, and also ultimately maybe even stay connected to the bigger purpose and the ancestors. Yeah. So there's a lot of benefits. Plus it's also that personal balance and centered in kind of not just the personal well-being, but also like, okay, what's the bigger picture here that we are trying to design for, that we can be in service of? And this is an emergent process as well of what's coming. Actually, you might come into the process already having an idea, but maybe you shouldn't be too much stuck in that sort of mindset. And the growth mindset maybe as well is to be open to what's emerging from the group, from the outside, that the kind of impulses you get from the people that you're interacting with, or the environment beyond the human beings you're interacting with.
I see. So what does that mean? Designing for profit, designing for mutual benefit, design for symbiosis, and so on and so forth. Growing. First and foremost, what we have to think about is how we design our redefined worldview. Is that the fair thing to say?
Yeah, I'm referring now to the Design Council's work on their systemic design framework that, I'm sorry, I have to say that they developed, but it's because the chief design officer was on our last sprint, and this was a conversation on value creation, and the values are hugely important as a sort of very first step in the design process, and it determines everything. So if you actually don't address that, you don't maybe get on the sort of conversation and plain level field of, well, where are we at? What is if you leave that entirely out, everybody designs from a different value set and it's not maybe as purposeful as it could be to design for the greater good of what's needed beyond just my own perception in that moment.
Right.
What I would like to add is not only the perspective, a renewed perspective, but also we may be able to invent a lens of viewing the society. Like, for example, seven generations ritual also kind of the perspective which was invented. And that is kind of design, I think. And also, for example, circular economy, the concept also is designed in a way. So with such concept, we can kind of intangible and difficult problem easier to understand. That is about lens. To focusing on current situation, and of course every interconnected network is so complex. So we don't have to deal with, in a way, whole picture, but you can get if there's some quite critical lens to perceive even one part. Then that is getting better. And keep continuing inventing such lens is very important, I think.
Speculative spectacles.
Interesting.
Is that it?
But difficult to understand. Interesting.
Well, spectacles is a really British term, so glasses maybe. But anyway, so yes, we need a worldview, alternative worldview, pluriversal maybe. If we cite and quote and respect the works of the Arturo Escobar, but the worldviews are also described as a key factors in redesigning our possible futures by the Anthony Dunn and Fiona Raby on one hand. On the other hand, it's one of the key concepts in the transition design coined by the Carnegie Mellon University Design Department. So it's really a fair thing to say that we kind of agree on the worldview as one thing we have to do. Now, at the same time, we need to come up with a tool. As long as the preferable future needs to be designed somehow, we need some kind of tool. But the speculative design is quite often expert-led. So we might want to have more somewhat sort of democratized, autonomous, or maybe even a everybody designs kind of stuff. But how would you respond to this redesigning of the speculative spectacles? What I call speculative spectacles.
That's a title for the next seminar. What I think about it is how we teach design now, because preparing designer for the future with old tools won't work. And we have to make sure that the way to design that we are delivering to this younger generation makes it possible for them to produce something that is always relevant. So that's why the empathy should be used for the sensitivity to detect the needs and the future needs, and also to not leave anyone behind. It's not just a slogan, because who will think about AI or internet if every day you have no electricity and a stable mode? So sometimes, power's out, and then the next day you have it on. So you have to look into it in a different design way. You can still use the design methods or anything to solve that, but then you have to make do with again the context that you are, where you are. Indonesia last year was this year held the presidency for ASEAN Summit. So in ASEAN countries, when we formed the ASEAN, the pact was about to talk about economy, security, and culture. But then it's always about the security and economy, never the culture. So we are trying to boost this side, because you cannot live just with the money and with the security, of course, needed. But then you also need to enhance what you have that you are proud of, because it's you.
Nice. Quite nice.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, also bouncing back on the discussion, I think it's really, really important for designers to change the narrative from a doom and gloom to a positive, beneficial narrative. So what people will gain also from this change out of avoiding disasters, because we are seeing that this doom and gloom narrative doesn't work. It's actually provoke an unconscious response of avoidance, and it's actually very important to address this. because if we ignore it and we continue to have this 80% doom and gloom narrative on climate change and environmental crisis, then the human factor, as we call it, might be the biggest impediment to change and to address the crisis effectively. And designers can really change the way people perceive, the transformation towards a sustainable society.
Great. We have approximately 5 minutes left, and I think now it's the time to have a Q&A.
First of all, thank you very much for your presentations, very, very interesting, and thank you very much, Marianne, for this morning. Has been really, really interesting as well. My question is, you as experts and leaders, we can say in that matter, how you envision the potential future of the manufacturing, no? Thinking in goods is going to decrease because you have been talking about craftsmanship, increase, repair. Monika, you have been talking about the iPhones, that if they come back, this is not really circular. You need probably to repair. And my question is, you as expert or leaders, how do you envision, which is your vision of the future, your opinion about that? Do you think we need to decrease and then generate income in other services? We are going to spread what we are doing from one place to many places? What do you think?
Great question. Autonomous, distributed, decentralized, or just simply the reduction of manufacturing for the goods? Or how do you foresee?
I agree with that. The distance is really the problem to make it closer. And so decentralized is really important, that if it's centralized, the distance for the logistic will cost a lot. And as well that the circular economy reduce the material from the outer side. So if saturated properly on site, then I believe that of course we keep in a way producing something because our population is growing, but we need to properly reinvent in distance closer and more saturated, and also we need to be creative to reuse and recycling and many of such a way to develop it.
Within the industrial context, because we're now, say, Industry Revolution 4.0, but we're still living with 1.0 as well. So the answer would be, again, make it relevant, where you can put the 4.0 where things are there. So not forcing it to be all 4.0 because it's not possible, but also what we need, especially in the global south again, what we need is maybe more like the transfer of technology, so we can produce, or we can operate our materials better with materials that are not harming. Because what we know from the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, we use the materials and processes that might be harmful, but now I think the important thing is to find a solution of substances and processes that is much less harmful, or maybe very safe. That depends on the context again. Thank you.
If you'd like to add anything.
Well, I mean, I don't think there is the answer and like a standardized. I think there needs to be a very contextual sort of approach to, and there is. I wanted to refer to a resource that might be helpful. So we at some point the foundation created a circular design guide. And as part of that, there are 6 design strategies mentioned, such as design for modularity, or product as a service, or design at waste, or I'm not going through all of them now. But basically, there are a couple of inspirations there, let's put it. And I think there's a lot more room for others. And we also mentioned sort of inspirations from nature. But I think, yeah, that would be maybe one to look at. And I suppose always start with the value at the beginning of what the purpose is. So it's very contextual.
To summarize, I think the research and development in circular product design has been great, but it's so systematic that you need to be really careful when you are trying to implement those design strategies or design principles. Like Dwinita-san kept talking, it needs to be highly contextualized. Otherwise, you can't just simply, put some of the design principles and put it in the manufacturing processes and say, oh, this is great, I'm now becoming circular. That's not the case. It's not going to work. I mean, maybe you are not even reducing the GHG emissions. So I think it's really important for anyone who's trying to develop a circular manufacturing business models to carefully identify the key design strategies to make it your own. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay, good. We have 1 minute left. Final words maybe, Marianne-san?
Yes, well, I mean, would just like to finish this discussion by saying that in Europe, we have very new and innovative legislation coming in force that will actually push the companies to report on their impacts on climate adaptation, climate mitigation, circular economy, biodiversity. And actually, this might have a really accelerating effect on the transformation of the economy. And also on the simplification of the value chain, because if you look at all the data that companies will need to collect to calculate this impact in a globalized economy, that's going to be a huge work. Things will move, but difficult to predict exactly how it will impact the rest of the world as well.
We can't predict the future, but we can still anticipate it. I think that's the right way of putting it. So thank you very much for all the panelists. With the applause, we would like to close this session. Thank you very much.